Live at Soledad Prison is my favorite live album of all time, and in many ways it's kind of what John Lee Hooker was building up to for his entire career. From the development of his one-chord sort of idiosyncratic vamp, to his first recordings on Modern Records in the late 40s, to his pop hit in '62 with Boom Boom, up to his collaboration the previous year with Canned Heat. At the end of that road, we get Live at Soledad Prison, an incredible blues rock record with some just great atmosphere and some incredible playing throughout. I'd even say the two songs where Hooker is only on guitar are still great, especially I'm Your Crosscut song, which has this fucking great groove to it. A big part of this record's appeal to me is that it's just a bunch of great players all trying to outplay each other for basically the entire record, especially after Old Man Hooker gets on the vocal. Ken Swank's drum work on something like Lucille is nuts, and Lucille especially is my highlight of the album. The part when the two guitarists, Charles Grime and Luther Tucker, dive into this fucking crazy ass solo around the 3-minute mark is some of the best shit I've ever heard in my entire life. Serve Me Right to Suffer, a remake of the album title track Serve You Right to Suffer, is this really moody piece about, being broken up with and then being prescribed milk, cream, and alcohol by a doctor. The album's most notable track is obviously its closer, Bang 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 Bang, where at the group's fastest, the power is shut off by the prison authorities to do a head check.
Bang, bang. Holla, bang. You said bang, bang. Stop it down.
I suppose the metaphor about shooting someone is not going to sit well with prison authorities, but, shame on them either way. I mean, all in all, it's a blistering record. It's got some great musicianship, and I'd recommend it to anybody who likes blues in any capacity. This is really a master at work. My promo copy of the album is actually called Soledad on My Mind on the label, and it's sure been on my mind ever since I heard this out. Did I fucking write that? By the time Cosmo's Factory is released in the summer of 1970, Creedence are on top of the world. The previous year they put out 5 top 3 singles and 3 massively successful albums. And that run of quality continues here. What's interesting to me about Creedence is just how fast they got good. They had existed in some form since 1959 as the Blue Velvets, and then in '61 they were already putting out releases. Before the release of Porterville, their output consisted of whatever pop rock or some pretty interesting psychedelia with the case of the single version of Walk on the Water. After Porterville, they have maybe 3 or 4 poor songs total as a 4-piece. And that quality is the most evident here on Cosmo's Factory. Aside from 3 covers which don't always land how they're supposed to, you would be forgiven for thinking this was a greatest hits album with some weird omissions. That all starts with the opener, the godly Ramble Tamble. People often talk about how Creedence was an anti-psychedelic group, but I can't see how that's even remotely the case with stuff like this. Go from a rockabilly section to this crazy almost space rock section back to the original, going past the whatever cover of Before You Accuse Me. Travelin' Band is a great barn burner, almost Chuck Berry pastiche with its kind of mini story songwriting. There's another okay cover in the form of Ooby Dooby Before Looking Out My Back Door. It's a lovely little country ditty, fun for the whole family. Fogerty says he wrote it for his son. It could also be a drug tune. Either one's just as likely, in my opinion. Run Through the Jungle is this one-chord psychedelic blues rock tune, and even though it's probably one of the best songs of the year, it's still only 3rd on this album. That's how good this thing is. It's the only song from this era I can think of about its particular issue, and it takes itself seriously in a way I like, if that makes any sense. Up Around the Bend's got a good riff, and it's got some fun lyrics about going out in the countryside, and the harmony singing's fun. It's a good time, and that's all you need, And even though My Baby Left Me follows that, which is my pick for weakest track on the album, that's followed by Who'll Stop the Rain, which I honestly kind of prefer to Have You Ever Seen the Rain. I think the progression in the chorus is better. I think the harmonies are wonderful. That song is immediately topped by I Heard It Through the Grapevine, a wonderful soul cover which just goes for a fucking mind-melting 12 minutes. It's a great solo. It's a great jam. It's fucking great. It's goddamn swamp rock at its finest. This got me into Creedence way back when. And then we end with my second favorite Creedence song of all time, Long As I Can See the Light. My first place pick is Rambo Tambo, if you were wondering. It's a very pretty southern soul tune, and I always like the saxophone solo on it and the use of the little electric piano. It's a beautiful way to lead out one of the best collections of rock made by guys who are pretending to be from the southern United States. In this same period, the Doors find themselves in the exact opposite scenario as Creedence. While The Soft Parade didn't sell badly upon release, it remains a divisive record amongst the general public, largely because of its orchestral arrangements. A few months before The Soft Parade released, the Doors gave a disastrous performance in Miami, leading to Jim Morrison's second arrest over a concert. During this show, they performed 4.5 songs in the span of an hour, and Jim may or may not have exposed himself to the audience.
Are you ready? Are you ready? You're all a bunch of fucking idiots! You blew it. Oh, come on. Wait a minute. I'm not gonna go out. Wait a minute, I'm not gonna take this shit.
Many were rightfully wondering if this would genuinely just kill the group.
The Doors started out very underground, very heavy. Since then, their music, in my opinion, has gotten more and more top 40.
And what Morrison Hotel does best is take that sense of doom and turn it into some great rock. Rock radio favorite Roadhouse Blues opens the record, and for all the talk about how Jim's lyrics were obtuse, few rock songs have a line more direct than "the future's uncertain and the end is always near." That goes straight into Waiting for the Sun, my favorite on the album, a moody portrait of the same loneliness on something like The Crystal Ship, and it's got less than 10 unique lines on the whole record. Another album highlight for me would be The Spy, and honestly, I'd probably call that song more electric blues than I would rock. That leads into the complex Queen of the Highway, which has like 5 different changes for whatever reason. And we end with Maggie McGill, a song about a woman left with no inheritance who decides to party away her troubles. Morrison Hotel is the best crossover the Doors did between their blues influence and their psychedelic works. It's got some of the band's best work in songwriting and performance, and even though it's a grower in some parts, especially its second half, I'd still call it their best work. I'd argue the band knew their time was probably coming by this point. It's emotionally vulnerable and it's bleak, and you can shake your ass to it. And what more can you really ask for? Seeing as the last 3 albums have been blues rock records with psychedelic influences, I'll give you a guess at the next album. Man, you look so stupid right now. I got you so good. Ziggy Stardust is like one of the most acclaimed records ever made. You don't need me to tell you how good it is. You don't need me to go through every song or all the highlights. If you've made it this far, you've heard this album. And if you've made it this far and haven't, just stop watching the video and go hear it. Yeah, it's only number 7, but it's more important than any other record on this list is to music. Let's be real here. David Bowie is like the most celebrated musician of the 20th century, and that's not for no reason. He's damn good. This album has earned its spot as a classic, and there's nothing I can say to really improve that. So let's just hear the next record. A lot of the conversation that surrounds There's a Riot Going On focuses on its troubled production history. And I think the reason that is because it's damn hard to describe this album without playing it for you. It encompasses the sound of the end of the optimism in the late 60s. It's one of the most lethargic records I've ever heard. There are parts that feel like Sly is lying to himself. There's even a song on here about lying to yourself. But I think a big failure that I've seen in critiquing this album is that it's not really political at all. That's not to say there's no political influence, but the songs themselves do not reflect it. Only 2 songs, Time and Thank You for Talking to Me Africa, even mention the wider world. This album is about the self, not about the society that surrounds the self. It's about laying in bed and recording vocals and the mic peaking on songs. 'Cause you ain't used to see me. It's about feeling like you're running out of time as a person. It's about feeling like you're deteriorating and crying about it. And it's about shutting out the outside world through music. And for as strange as that may seem, that was extremely appealing to the general public of 1971. This album kept Led Zeppelin 4 off the top of the charts. And it may have been the only record capable of doing that. It is an extremely rich record in terms of raw atmosphere. There is a dark cloud over the entire thing. And yet, the album's general philosophy keeps its appeal. It's an album that's almost entirely hopeless at points without being dramatic in the slightest, and I like it for that. A lot of it doesn't make sense, but oftentimes that's the world you find yourself in. Going from Riot to Rehearsals for Retirement is going out of the frying pan and into the fire. Sly Stone, while it took him decades, did eventually escape his demons. Phil Ochs did not. Earlier in the 60s, Ochs was second only really to Dylan as the top political songwriter of the folk revival movement. Ochs would support his turn into folk rock, and Ochs himself would make 2 Baroque pop records before his attendance at the 1968 Democratic National Convention pushed him down the road he would spend the last 7 years of his life on. Rehearsals for Retirement is a hopeless album. In its more beautiful moments, it is absurd or cryptic. In its more rock-oriented songs, it is bubbling with rage or satirical. And at its most haunting, we get The Scorpion Departs But Never Returns, a song about the sinking of the USS Scorpion. Ochs' conclusion tells of just how those sailors will never see the light of day again. Neither will many of the politically active during this era. With topics ranging from U.S. interventionism, police brutality, the death of Lenny Bruce, the aforementioned USS Scorpion, Ochs' own life up to this point, and just how much he hates the city of LA. It is a brilliantly produced and arranged piece of Baroque pop and folk fusion. And if you can get anything at all out of this, you will get a mountain's worth. Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones Limited, or as I'll be calling it, just Pisces, is my favorite pop record of all time. This was the Monkees' second album after starting to play their own instruments, and I would say that it's both their most consistent and their best. Chip Douglas does a great job on production, and the palette of musical influence across this record is used to great effect. You go from country to AM pop to a Harry Nilsson tune to an almost garage rock song, pop rock of Pleasant Valley Sunday, the experimentation on Daily Nightly, the beautiful Don't Call on Me, and the groupie rave up Star Collector. The Door into Summer and Love Is Only Sleeping are probably in Mike Nesmith's top 5 compositions. It features a Craig Smith song on here who I love, and it manages to be innovative without being full of itself. It's never too glum or too cheery, and it all flows well together. This album is here for the same reasons that Cosmos Factory is here. It wasn't intended to be a masterwork, but it just so happens that every song on here is really, really good. If you need some fun, then you can put this on, because the next 3 albums are not going to give you that. This is not an album from The Animals as you may be thinking of them. The Animals are mainly known now for their arrangement of House of the Rising Sun, an old folk tune, but the original lineup of the group would disband by the latter half of 1966. However, before the end of the year, lead singer Eric Burdon would reform the group as Eric Burdon and the Animals. The group set up shop in the States, and although no lineup lasted in between each album, they would put out 4 records as a psychedelic act. By the summer of 1968, they were going to produce their 3rd album, Every One of Us, and what they would come out with is probably the bleakest album on this list. There are only 7 songs on this album, so I'll go through them all. White Houses is a pop rock psych tune about the moral bankruptcy of suburban America. It's got some outdated language just because of the nature of the era, but I think it has a great solo, and its overall message is not something I totally disagree with. Uppers and Downers is the old nursery rhyme, The Grand Old Duke of York. I assume it's like a drug reference. Serenade to a Sweet Lady is this jazz rock instrumental. It's very pretty, it's very nice. I didn't really get jazz until these last 2 years, but now I really dig it. The Immigrant Lad is a folk song about the impoverished and co-workers in particular. And it ends with a 2-minute fake interview about race relationships among working class people. And this kind of gives the album an appeal to me that no other record has.
The good ones, where you can have a good entertainment.
Well, it's more of a social thing down here, mate,
It's not afraid to be indulgent or seem like it's out of its depth, and I think that's actually kind of respectable. And obviously that's not for everybody, but it's my list. You're the Guru Falls that one, and I want to play a clip for you.
My lady came to see me in a hospital bed. Well, at least I knew that my lady really cared. After giving me a second-hand rose, he said, "Where's your donation, man? It's all for a good cause."
I think you can tell what I like about this one. A song about cults or people who weaponize like Eastern religion for their own gains or something like that is an interesting topic from this era. We then get a cover of the jazz standard St. James Infirmary, which has a great solo and great jam ending and a great performance from Burden on vocals. This guy is sang House of the Rising Sun after all, so I'm not really shocked, but you know. And we close this out with New York 1963, America 1968. I would call this basically an early prog rock tune, or at least on the line between psychedelic and prog. It opens with this folky section about visiting America for the first time and exploring Harlem in the rain, and about racial subjugation and segregation, and about violence in poor communities. Then it cuts to an interview with a guy who I don't have any clue about his identity. He talks about being turned away as an Air Force pilot because they didn't want him, presumably because of race. Then he talks about growing up impoverished, how people would die in car accidents because ambulances never came, how nobody had any food, and how hopeless everything was. He brings up that if people don't do something now, there will never be any change in the world. It really only hit me why I liked the interview as much as I did while making this video. The first section is Eric thinking about his romanticizing and fascination with the black experience and black art before and during his first visit to America. It uses outdated language to do so, but it gets that point across. Eric achieved monumental success covering black artists, but as he spends time in America, he realizes that he's made his own image of the world up in his head. And this interview is the key to that. He hasn't seen reality. He hasn't been knocked out of the box, so to say. And after learning all this or discovering this about himself, the role he's played in the world, he wants to escape himself. And that is the point of the third section. We then cut to a jam that is basically an acid trip. Burton and Zoot Money play opposing roles like the angel and the devil on the shoulder. And we end with this woman vocalizing something that I can't really make out. I don't know what she said. But all in all, even if I'm the only fan of this album on earth, you know, I'm kind of good with that. It's my precious little angel. I'm not even certain people who worked on the closing track of this album would agree with my interpretation of it. And even if it hasn't aged the greatest, it's an interesting time capsule of the ideas of post-Summer of Love musicians. I'm pretty sure it was the first album on this list I ever heard, and I think it was important for my own musical development anyway. So you might not care for this one, but I wanted to throw it out there because I really like it. I had to grow to love Goodbye and Hello, but once I got it, I really got it. This is a wonderful psychedelic folk rock album. Now that is largely due to Tim's compositions, but I wouldn't count out like Eddie Hall, the session drummer, who lays down some of my favorite drum work ever. The title track is this sweeping prog folk epic. The opener is this great protest tune with an incredible rhythm section. And the stretch from Pleasant Street up until Phantasmagoria and 2 is genuinely my favorite run in any album ever. I would call Once I Was the greatest love song ever written. Honestly, this album would have a good shot at being number one if not for the presence of Carnival Song and Night Errand. They're not awful, but they are significantly weaker than the rest of the album. Even down to the last couple seconds of the closer, the surreal Morning Glory, those harmonies are beautiful. Like, this album is just beautiful all the way down. We're getting to the point where it's hard to talk about how good these albums are just because I have nothing but positive emotions for them. But we're on the last one, so let me close it out. If you've known me for any amount of time, I have probably told you about this album. For a group which lasted a little under a year, recorded like 13 songs total, was basically completely composed of non-rock musicians, many of whom would never play rock again after making this album, and who would never reunite after breaking up. This record is a miracle and a masterpiece. I sometimes skip Cloud Song when I'm not in the mood, but besides that, you can just hear this thing back to front over and over and over and over and over again. It is a perfect record at being both pretty and hard-edged at the same time. Dorothy Moskowitz and Joseph Byrd make a great songwriting team, And Gordon Marin's 2 songs on here are also some of the best stuff here. It's a real shame they couldn't resolve the Baroque pop and acid rock elements of their sound, because I would shave all the hair off my head for a second album of these guys. Or even like a live tape. I know they played off sheet music, but still. Not having any guitar, this album uses an electric violin and assorted electronics to fill in for that. And its sound is genuinely otherworldly at points. You go from deconstructions of blues rock, to the aforementioned Baroque pop, to sound collages, to these spacey ballads, to a vaudeville pastiche, and all of it is great. Again, it may not be for everyone, but it sure is for me, because it's the best album ever made. If nothing else, it has the big beat, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Thank you for making it through this sort of rambly piece that I've constructed for you here. I know that my descriptions here were more detailed for some albums than others, but I wanted to leave room to make bigger videos on this material in the future, if anybody's interested, obviously. So I didn't want to give the whole game away. You know, and if you like any of this stuff, consider giving me a subscription. I'll be talking about it more in the future. But I wanted to, again, thank you for making it this far. That's all for today, everybody. May Sazaki's shoe may close your mouth and open your mind, and I'll see you next time on the 68 Treatment.
We're done. Welcome to Germany.